Hi. For me, it's good morning, everyone, because I am in Denver, Colorado. I go to the University of Colorado School of Medicine, which is actually located in Aurora, which is just east of Denver. So I'm in the Rocky Mountains here, and it's 11:34 a.m. So I am a fourth year medical student, and I am super excited for my future career in family medicine. But if you had asked me 20 years ago if this is what I would be doing, I would be totally shocked. I never thought I would have been a doctor. Um, Growing up, I sort of grew up in the shadow of an older sister who was really talented at science and math. I remember we had the same teacher in sixth grade, and I was struggling so much in her class. And I remember staying after school one day to just work on some math with her. And she looked at me and she said, "I don't get it. Your sister was so good at this, and you just can't do it." Um, and with that messaging and the messaging I think that a lot of girls get about math and science being for boys, and um, having to sort of swim upstream for that, I always just defined myself as being different than my sister. I was like, okay, I can't do science, but I can do reading and I can do writing and I can do history and social studies. And that actually continued for me all the way through college. I studied social studies as an undergraduate, mostly medical anthropology, which is actually like the stories of people experiencing illness and how people interact with the healthcare system. And as I was doing that, I also was getting really involved in wilderness leadership. So, like taking people on trips in the forest, hiking and stuff. And as I did that, I had to get some first aid training. And I thought this was just like the most fun thing ever. I loved thinking through what was going on with someone, like what problems needed to be solved, and how to fix them. And it occurred to me that I could actually do this for the rest of my life, and I could do it as a healthcare professional, potentially as a doctor. So I started taking science classes, and turns out I'm not actually bad at science. I just wasn't as good at it naturally as my sister. And I just had to work a little bit harder to get there. But there's so much more to medicine than just science. So I started taking science classes a little bit in college, and I actually moved out to Colorado to be a ski bum and worked as an EMT out here for a while, and realized that as much as I loved skiing, I really, really wanted to take care of people and wanted to do that through medicine. So I went back to school. I took more undergrad classes and got those prerequisite classes done, and applied to medical school from there. So that's kind of been my journey. And I grew up on the East Coast and went to a college where their school of medicine didn't even have a family medicine department. So when I learned about family medicine in medical school, it was just a total revelation for me. I was so excited because it was really my calling. Um, and I'm so excited to hear other stories and answer questions for y'all.
Thank you so much, Kiyomi, for sharing your story. Now we're going to hear from Ari.
Hi everyone, I'm Ari. I'm currently a fourth year like Kiyomi, but I'm at USC in LA, and so been here for the past 4 years. And when I was thinking about what to talk to you guys about, I really wanted to kind of think back to when I was in high school, what was kind of going through my head during that time. So just for some context, I'm from Chino, which is just like a little city east of East LA. And my first kind of conscious memory of the possibility of being a doctor kind of being floated in my reality was my senior year of high school. And just for some context, I went to a public high school that's kind of considered low income and under-resourced, and the students were about 85% Latino. So when I first heard of someone wanting to be a doctor, I remember I have a very distinct memory of my friend Omar like coming up to me and just being like, we were talking about what we wanted to be when we grew up, and he said, I want to be a doctor. And I remember looking at this man and thinking he was absolutely crazy. I just thought, like, people from here do not become doctors. This man needs to be a little more realistic with his life. But, and that was my first honest to God thought. And I realized even though I thought I was thinking about Omar in that moment, like, I was actually just projecting the limitations I had on myself onto Omar. So, and those limitations were there for very real reasons. They were financial, they were a fear of not being able to keep up academically, and just a lack of knowledge of how to even start, like where to even start on a career in medicine. So even though there were reasons for those limitations, those were just reasons that the path wouldn't be easy, but those weren't reasons that the path wouldn't be like possible. So if any of you have any sort of like limits on any goals you have, I really want you to just kind of shed them, not only for yourself, but also for the people around you. Because I'm not sure if what Omar said, like flip some sort of switch in my head, like maybe I could become a doctor, but I'm sure it had some sort of like subconscious reason for why I ended up, going to that first pre-med meeting when I started college. So I want you all to really just like dream big enough for yourself, and like just so that everybody around you can dream just as big. And one of the things I love about medicine is that there's so many different kinds of doctors and so many different kinds of people that we need to be doctors. Like there's so much room for all of us, and especially in family medicine, like it's so vast and so unique and so like diverse that literally there's room for every single one of you. So yeah, that's kind of the story of like little high school me, and I hope that helps.
Thanks, Ari. Amy, would you share your story?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. So excited to join you all. So my name is Amy Hoffman, and I am starting my 4th year of medical school at Penn State College of Medicine. I went to the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, UMBC in Maryland for college. And just a little bit about my story. So I never decided on medical school until I was like halfway through college. There was, in the back of my mind, I was always like, oh, maybe medicine would be like something interesting. But all throughout high school, like my favorite course was sociology. I liked biology, but the biochemistry stressed me out a little bit too much. And come senior year of high school, there was like this amazing lab opportunity that like the seniors could apply to. And it was kind of known like, oh, if you want to go into medicine, if you want to be like a competitive applicant for college, like you need to do this lab experience. But if I had done that, I wouldn't have been able to do the musical, which was so important to me. So I ended up not doing it. And kind of in my head, I was like, that's for like those like science nerds. Like I'm going to do health policy, public health, like I'm going to work for the World Health Organization. I'm going to do amazing work through that. And then it really wasn't until college when I was working at the Maryland Department of Health. I was working under a chief medical officer. So this was an actual clinician who was working in like health policy. And so kind of seeing how we need clinicians in these health policy roles and public health roles, which we are obviously seeing a lot more of too now with like COVID-19. But it was really kind of seeing that field of like the intersection of public health and medicine is what really kind of inspired me to apply for medical school. And something else that I learned in college is that there's not a ton of programs, but there's some programs where you can get your MD and your PhD, which is a, like a PhD in a science field, but you can get it in anthropology. And I think that just kind of proved to me that like, there's so many different needs within medicine. You don't need to be a researcher. You don't need to be in the lab. Just having such a focus on humanities and social sciences is also so important in medicine. And I've continued to remain involved with health policy, and that's something that I hope to do along the road as I become a family physician, which is one of the specialties that you can apply to once you finish medical school after 4 years. So I guess my advice to all of you guys is just to kind of find your interests and don't feel like you have to like follow this script or recipe to become a good applicant for college or for medical school. I'm so grateful that I didn't do that research opportunity in high school. I'm sure it would have been wonderful, but being in the musical and just, keeping up with dance and singing just was like part of who I was. And I wasn't really willing to give that up. And I think that is just so important that you just let yourself shine and don't feel like you need to do certain things because you feel like you need to. So happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thanks so much, panelists, for sharing your stories. And thank you for starting some questions in the chat. That is absolutely perfect. We're going to jump into a little bit of a panel discussion, and we've prepared some questions ahead of time based on what we've heard from high school students really consistently, what we think are normally the biggest questions that students ask. But we want to also know what your questions are today. So as we're having this panel discussion, please send in additional questions, and we'll take some time to answer your specific questions as well. The first question for the group actually is one that we received, and I think one that is important to talk about to make sure everybody is on the same page together. So would one of our panelists help us understand what's the difference between medical school and residency, and when do you choose your specific kind of specialty path in medicine? Anyone want to jump in on that one?
I can answer that. So medical school is a 4-year degree that you get after you finish college. So after you get your bachelor's degree. And you decide in medical school what specialty you want to go into. So you can apply to medical school having absolutely no idea what you want to do. You could be interested in neurosurgery, you could be interested in psychiatry, you could be interested in pathology. And I think that's something medical schools like to see, is that you're just open-minded and really committed to the field of medicine. That to say too, you also can go in saying, oh, I have an interest in primary care. Oh, I have an interest in women's health. Like if a lot of people enter medical school on so many different paths. So once you finish medical school, kind of in your final year of medical school is when you apply to residency. So when you graduate medical school, you have your medical degree, whether that's an MD or a DO. However, you're not fully licensed to practice independently. So that is when you go to residency. So the length of residency depends on what field you go into. Family medicine is 3 years, general surgery is 5 years, and then can go up to 7 years for some surgical subspecialties. If you watch Grey's Anatomy, they are general surgery interns. So they've just finished medical school and are starting their residency. And then once you finish residency is when you take your licensure exam, and then you're fully credentialed. And then we use the fancy term attending. So you're an attending physician. So you have completed all of your training, and then that is when you can start practicing independently.
Yeah, it's a great question. So when you enter residency, that's when you become your specialty. So when you graduate medical school, you're a doctor, you're a physician. And when you enter residency, you are a family physician or a pediatrician or a surgeon. And that's where you get that additional training. A lot of people even end up subspecializing beyond residency. So Amy mentioned surgical subspecialties. You might want to go into a specific organ system for surgery, for example. But in family medicine, most physicians finish their family medicine residency after 3 years post-medical school and go straight into primary care practice in their communities. And that's one of the great things about family medicine is it's one of the fastest routes through medicine to start making a difference in your community. And your scope of practice is really broad. You can treat any age, any gender, any patient that walks in the door, any organ system. Family physicians really have no limitations in that matter. And that's one of the exciting things about that path. So panelists, let's build on this question a little bit more. Why does it take so long to become a doctor? And why did you decide to take on all of that education? Who wants to jump in on that question?
Yes, I have a couple thoughts. One of my mentors had always said to me, don't go to graduate school until it's what you need to do what you want to do next. So I think, you don't have to know what specialty you want to do when you're entering medical school. Although some people find it really helpful, to find a path to get on a path and then see what other alternative paths like pop up as you come along. But I think that like knowing that you want to be a doctor and that is absolutely what you want to do is pretty important when committing to become a physician. I think that training takes so long because for lack of a like better way of saying it, like it's a life or death sort of thing. Like people are giving you so much trust and you're given so much responsibility to help people with their quality of life, and then sometimes often, you know, the longevity of their, like the length of their life as well. And so that requires a lot. And there's just so much knowledge to have. And a lot of medicine is actually pattern recognition. And so it takes time to have enough repetition, to see enough patients, to see hundreds, thousands of patients, right? To build on these patterns and get them so deeply into your body and into your mind that you're able to pick up on them accurately and quickly. And then also, of course, like, you know, learning how to talk to patients is important, and learning how to do all those different pieces of being a physician. There's a lot of different pieces to it, especially with a specialty like family medicine. You tend to not just be like a medical doctor, but also like involved in your community as a source of knowledge. So all those things require years of training. And it's intense, it's a lot. I think it's not something to be taken lightly. And so I think, you know, that I've adopted my mentor's advice of, you know, if you know that you want to be a doctor and you need to go to medical school to do it, then that's the right time to go. And of course I'm biased because I took a few years between college and medical school to work and do other things and kind of explore different fields in the healthcare professions as well. Before I decided that becoming a physician would be the right path for me.
Yeah, just to go off what Kiyomi said, I think a big thing that I heard when I would tell people I wanted to be a doctor was they would say, oh, that takes so much time. You know, that's like 10 years of school. Like, why do you want to do that? Don't you just want to make money or like work? And I don't know, every time I think like time is going to pass no matter what. Those 10 years are going to go by no matter what. So might as well like spend it doing something you love. I think I, like Kiyomi, I only took a year though between college and medical school, and working is not all it's cracked up to be. Okay, it's not even that fun. I think the biggest thing I missed was learning. I was just like, I'm not really learning that much every day, and I missed it so much. So honestly, yes, it takes 10 years, but that's like 10 years of so much learning and so much fun. And like, I think obviously it's still very challenging. It's not all sunshine and roses, but it is so fulfilling, and you grow so much. And I think another one of my favorite things about this kind of like extended time is you kind of just get 3 sets of just brand new friends, because it's kind of like medical school or college, medical school, residency, and that's like 3 pools of such cool people. So you just make so many friends, and that versus just kind of staying at one job for 10 years, that's not even that many friends. So I always tell people, might as well spend those 10 years doing something exciting, something you love. And if it's what you want to do, it is so worth it. And I wouldn't want to spend this decade doing anything else.
Those are some great answers. We have another question that relates to how long it takes to do medical school, and that's give us some insights about the financial implications of a career in medicine. So it costs a lot to go to medical school. Help us understand that, but then you can make a lot in your career. Physicians are well paid. So, you know, without giving us your bank account, you know, secret information, tell us a little bit about how you weighed the pros and cons of the financial commitment and the earning potential of a career in medicine, and any advice that you got along the way that really helped you. And also, if you have any insights about, you know, is there support out there, financial support for our careers in medicine? Who wants to jump in on that one?
I think I could probably jump in. One of the big barriers was like financial, and I was just like really couldn't even fathom how much medical school is, especially USC. It's like one of the most expensive schools in the nation. So basically, I think I went into undergrad just thinking like, okay, loans, everybody does it. But yeah, there are definitely, you can do that. I always suggest, you know, if you can go to a cheaper school, doesn't matter what school you go to, just matters what you do there. My sister went to a Cal State. Homegirl has way less loans than me. She's doing just fine. There's the junior college route. So those are just kind of ways to mitigate costs in undergrad. There's also scholarships, which is annoying. My mom always said, oh, apply to scholarships. I mean, that's hard, but you know, you can try to do that too. There's also need-based. So just kind of doing that research ahead of time and maybe just trying to think about it a little bit financially. And then for medical school, I always tell pre-meds, it's hard. I mean, you apply and you kind of go wherever accepts you, and there's like little nuances like, oh, you want to get into more so you can have some leverage, some bargaining power, but it is possible. There are a lot more scholarships in medical school, I think, than undergrad. It's a lot easier to apply to scholarships. I've had a lot more success in terms of applying to scholarships in medical school. And also before you get in, when you get in, there are a lot of schools that give you aid. Like USC gave me a full ride. I know people that, all my friends got a full ride from USC. So it's definitely possible. Like, I don't want you guys at this point in your life at like 17 years old saying, well, no, I can't do this because it's not financially feasible. Like, there are definitely ways to make it financially feasible. That doesn't mean it's easy, but it's possible.
I think a few things. I mean, the reality is that if you are successful in completing a degree, the earning potential as a physician is very good. And if you are, you know, careful and responsible with your spending and use the resources that are available to you. So there will always be like advisors who can help you with the journey. Like paying off your loans is usually pretty attainable, more so than I think is often the case for undergraduate loans. And schools will work with you to make it happen, or rather to like make sure that you can get through medical school comfortably. But it is hard. And I think there is a bit of hustle too. Like, I think that finding scholarships, like Ari was mentioning, sometimes you can like, there's, you know, websites where you can like Google things and like I've found the most obscure scholarships and I'm like, I am one of the few people that's going to qualify for this and apply. So yeah, but it's not easy, especially if you have a family to support or, you know, medical expenses or anything like that. I think though, if it's something that you're really committed to, your school will work with you to help you through it, and to like find folks who've had similar paths as you and sort of ask how they've done it, and to not be afraid to like address the question of finances because it's real and it's a challenge.
Thanks, panelists, for these great answers. I'll pop into the chat some resources from the Association of American Medical Colleges. They have a pretty robust section on medical school debt. They also have a debt fact card that shares a little bit of information about the average debt. And I'll share that in the chat as well, so you can look it up for yourselves and kind of see those numbers. Educational debt depends on whether you had to take loans before medical school, and most people do during medical school, but not everyone. What type of medical school you choose, public, private, DOMD schools actually have a difference in average debt and average cost between them. So those are some of the things to look into. And then your earning potential. So you're gonna have, the average person has six-figure debt, and that means in the hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt upon graduation from medical school. One of our panelists shared in the chat that once you get into residency, you start making money, which is great. You make a lot more money after residency. So your paycheck in residency is not as big as it's gonna be. And every single physician, the average salary for every single type of physician is also in the six figures. So you're going to be making in the hundreds of thousands of dollars annually. You'll be in the top 1 to 5% of earners, usually 1 to 2% of earners in the entire country. So it's kind of relative. You graduate with a lot higher debt, you make a lot more money. And I think what our panelists are reflecting is that it's manageable. One of the things we see with a career in primary care medicine is that the average salary is lower than a career in a subspecialty of medicine. But again, you get to start paying on your loans sooner, so that because you're out in practice sooner. And so it's all really relative. And our family physicians are financially comfortable. And so don't let money be the only driving force. Like, follow your passion, and the finances will work out. You'll make them work. It takes work to make it work out. But if you're not doing what you love, it's not gonna matter what your checkbook looks like. So really follow your passion, and you can make the finances work out. All right, let's jump into another question that we had prepared, panel. And then right after that, let's jump into some of the questions we're getting, more questions that we're getting from our participants. So please continue putting questions in the chat. We're collecting those, and we're excited to jump into those. So one of the questions I want to hear from you all about is, how have you gotten involved beyond just the core elements of your education, the classes you had to take at your schools? What have you done to get involved either in advocacy or student leadership or anything else that kind of helped round out your experiences and shape who you've become and who you are becoming as a medical professional?
I can hop in. So this is actually something I struggled with because I lived in Denver before starting medical school and was really involved in some community work. So I was actually part of a dance company that is a dance company for folks with all sorts of different abilities and disabilities. So like folks who use wheelchairs and folks who use walkers or aren't able to see or hear, that sort of thing. And it actually was very difficult for me to transition from sort of having a 40-hour-a-week job to becoming a medical student and stay as involved as I was. So it was definitely a balancing act. And I had sort of stepped back from my leadership with that organization at first, but while I figured out how to be a medical student, and then was able to sort of get back into the activities that I loved as I got that experience under my belt. So I haven't been that involved in organizations on campus because for me, I think I'm just more, since I was already a part of the community, I've really stayed active in my community. So I still work with that dance company and I'm really involved in a food justice organization that runs a cafe in Denver. I volunteer there and then I actually serve on their board as well, which is a really cool experience and not one that I felt like I was qualified for, but I think as COVID hit, they were really excited to have a medical perspective on their board. So that was really neat and a great example of how medicine can be so much more than just seeing patients in clinic. And I'm actually really involved in research as well. I love doing research, not so much in the lab with a lab coat on and pipettes, because as I mentioned, science is not basic science, not really my thing. But I do some community-based research and clinical research. So, I get to talk to people and interview them and ask questions about how they experience medicine and try to find ways to make it better. So those are some of my primary activities.
I think a big question that I get on panels from high schoolers or any age really is well, what extracurriculars did you do and what extracurriculars can I do so that I can kind of end up where you are? And honestly, I always just say do whatever makes you excited, do whatever makes you happy. Kiyomi just stated she has so many diverse interests and does cool things. Not a lot of people want to hear about you being a scribe for 10 years, even though that's cool in its own way. But yeah, no, just do whatever makes you excited. I did folklorico, which is a traditional Mexican dance in college. I joined the lacrosse team. I had never heard of lacrosse. I was just like, this sounds cool. So I did that. Like, it just literally whatever makes you excited. And a huge thing that I didn't, and it'll all weave into your medical path when you least expect it, honestly. It'll shape you in a way that you won't realize until way down the line. Like, I decided to do a Chicano Studies minor my sophomore year of college, and I was just like, no, I just want to do this kind of separate from medicine. Like, I'm gonna do medicine my whole life. This is the only time that I can do something non-medical. And it was the most medical thing I did, probably, it ended up being, because it ended up kind of fueling my passion. It ended up fueling kind of the core of my passion for medicine after I learned about all the disparities in a lot of under-resourced and marginalized communities. And that's just been kind of thing that's been driving me ever since, honestly. So you're going to choose whatever makes you excited and happy, and it's really going to inform your journey in ways you do not expect down the line.
Great answers. All right, let's jump into some more of your questions. We've had multiple people asking for book recommendations, things that high school students can read, medical books that high school students can read. Do you all have any recommendations for books? I'm also wondering if you have recommendations for podcasts, articles, apps you use. What do you recommend students listen to or read?
I will kind of go off of what Kiyomi put in the chat, is really just like find what your like passions are. So I was really interested in health policy kind of at the end of high school and more into college. And so I would read like Politico has like a daily like health policy news update. I would read or listen to like this podcast called Conversations on Healthcare. And I just really loved health policy and just really immersing myself in it, because in medical school, like, you just kind of have to prioritize what hobbies, and just I'm already reading and learning so much for medical school that my health policy reading has kind of decreased a little bit. So really, just if you have like an interesting hobby, I would just recommend just taking this time to immerse yourself in it, because despite doing all of that work in college, it's really helped me throughout medical school. But to give an actual book, right before college, I read Mountains Beyond Mountains, which is about Paul Farmer and just some of his global health work that he does in Haiti. And that was kind of my first introduction to global health. And I just thought it was like a really great book to learn about kind of the intersection of medicine and public health and global health. So that's one specific book that I really liked.
I'm working on typing up a list for y'all that I'll send in the chat.
Yeah, it's hard for me because I am so like health book averse. Like, I tried reading a book by a doctor. I was like, I can't do this in my free time. No. So I obviously like enjoy medical school so much, but like in terms of my reading, I try to make it as broad as possible and non-medical as possible. Just because also the core of medicine is just like you get to know people's stories, and the more stories you're exposed to, the better, honestly. So just read all different kinds of stories. I feel like I always prioritize books by people of color. Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates is one of my favorite books, and it's just reading about communities outside your own is going to be the most beneficial thing, I think.
Some great advice for all of us. We got a question from somebody that's considering nursing, considering medicine, and they're really wondering what's the hardest part of medical school? What's the hardest thing you encountered in medical school, and how did you get past it? Anyone want to share a story about getting through a rough time?
I'll just say, I think the hardest thing of medical school is just the pressure that we put on ourselves. It's just, I remember like in college, like I put so much pressure on myself to like be an amazing pre-med and be an amazing applicant. And like that, just like the stress is just like not worth it. I mean, I think there's like healthy ways to like cope and manage with stress. But there's just so many like courses, like, oh, I want to make sure I get honors in this. Oh, I need to make sure I get like this kind of score on this test. And I think it's honestly just like the pressure you put on yourselves. And I also know that there's also a lot of pressure in high schoolers and college students to choose medicine over nursing versus physician assistant. And kind of my advice for that is like, there's so many wonderful ways to get involved in the healthcare field. If you decide like, I'm going to go into medical school, and then you learn more about like nursing or becoming a nurse practitioner and realize that aligns more with your goals, like that is absolutely not a failure. Like it is, entering medicine and healthcare can take so many different paths. So I think it's honestly the pressure we put on ourselves, is still kind of ongoing. The hardest thing I'm facing now, I take a big exam in a few weeks, and I'm putting my stress, like I'm putting pressure on myself every day for that. And it's just sometimes nice to step back and take a deep breath and reflect, like this will not impact what kind of physician I'm going to be, or what kind of health professional, or what kind of person in the world that you're going to be.
Yeah, just to echo what Amy said, I think that's such a good point. It's definitely the pressure we put on ourselves. And honestly, the hardest part about medical school is so different for everybody. I think it's really about how you manage the hardest parts. And I think like taking care of your mental health is kind of the most important thing. Like I'm in therapy right now. I had therapy this morning. I meet with a psychiatrist every month. It's just everyone has their own unique struggles. For me, it's very specific to being like underrepresented in medicine. It's kind of a feelings of lack of confidence or inadequacy, which everybody deals with. So it really is, the hardest part is so personal to you. I think the most important thing is having the tools to handle it. And a lot of medical schools are getting better at providing mental health services. Like at USC, we're required to see a therapist. Just having those tools accessible to you is the most important thing.
I will echo Ari. I actually went through a really tough time my first year of medical school, and needed to take a little bit of time off away from my classes to get more intensive psychiatric care. I think for me, a lot of the challenges were also about identity. I think I mentioned, so coming into med school a little bit older, I think I had a really strong sense of who I was, like what was core to me, how I defined myself, what my story was. And there's a lot of medical school that requires a certain amount of sort of conformity, and for better or worse. Like you're learning a new language. There are these crazy words that like, what? Like, yeah, like I'm trying to think of a good example right now off the top of my head, but like you are learning how to speak a new language and how to like a new way of talking, a new syntax, a new grammar, and a new way of presenting yourself and presenting the way that you know things and presenting knowledge. And especially for folks who are coming from families that don't have physicians, or are underrepresented in medicine, that can be really challenging. So making sure that you have the supports in place to help you through that is huge. Like I recommend to everyone. And also I will say a lot of that identity formation and those challenges comes along in college too. So as you guys are heading toward college, I highly recommend, finding the supports and never hesitating to reach out for help. Yeah, so I think for me, that was most challenging. So realizing like I could no longer be a rehearsal director for a dance company and also study as much as I needed to. And that I was someone who, and I think many medical students feel this way, I'm someone who wants to be out in the world and doing things and taking action. And for the first 2 years, the way my curriculum was structured, I didn't have time to do that. I had to be inside a library studying, and that was really hard. So getting through that and having someone to like help me make meaning of that was really important.
So panelists, we have 2 minutes left. I'm going to ask you each to share in 20 or 30 seconds. What's one high point of medical school? What's something that you've loved about your experience? Quickly, to leave us on a high point.
I'll say meeting amazing patients and hearing their stories. It is such an honor to be a part of people's lives and to just like hear their experiences that I'm just so grateful to be in this field and enter family medicine.
Yeah, just going off what Amy said, not only getting to meet so many patients, but also getting to meet so many colleagues, so many doctors that you would have never met if you didn't go to medical school. Just like, it's always the people, and just being immersed in so many different lives and having them being yours is truly the best part.
Yeah, so my very first rotation as a third year, I was taking care of a patient who's from Sudan, and my husband is from Egypt, and I had just gone to Egypt to meet his family. And she had her daughter bring like an iftar meal for him so that he could break his fast during Ramadan. So this patient like insisted that I take this food home for my husband. And when she was discharged, was like really totally confused why I couldn't be her primary care doctor. I was like, well, I'm a medical student. I'm not actually a doctor yet. And that was just the most incredible feeling of connecting with this person and seeing them get better.
Those are some amazing stories. Well, thank you, panelists, for sharing with us today. Thank you mostly to all of you HOSA members for joining us today. I hope you found a lot of value out of this conversation. If you're interested in talking with us more, talking with medical students more, the AAFP is here in the exhibit hall, in the Get Inspired exhibit hall. You'll see AAFP, American Academy of Family Physicians. Come chat with us. And when you get back to your local chapters, we actually just launched a new family medicine career test, and then also a family medicine competitive event. And in the competitive event, you're going to get paired up with a family physician and paired up with a medical student and get to really explore more about their experiences in the career and get to do a HOSA competition out of it. So we hope that you'll take the opportunity to get to know family medicine a little bit more, and best of luck to all of you on your journeys. You're going to be amazing wherever you decide to go. So thanks for being here today, and we hope to bump into you again at the conference and in the future. Bye-bye, everyone.